Week 17 of the fantasy football season. His quarterback sits every matchup for championship week. The first matchup, Christmas Day, Kansas City Chiefs at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Patrick Mahomes, he played in last week's game. He looked good. He put up numbers. Hollywood Brown back in the lineup. And this week, even in a tough matchup at the Steelers, I think Patrick Mahomes still could go out there. He's still a decent start. I know he hasn't had elite numbers this year, but he's still a quarterback in that 20, 22-point range. He's getting weekly. Russell Wilson is sit. George Pickens, we'll see if he comes back in this game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But this week's a tough matchup. One of the better defenses, believe it or not, in the league. He is this Kansas City defense. So this offense don't have many weapons. Even with Pickens back, pretty much him and Freiermuth, the only consistent options. And with the tough matchup this week, Wilson is sit. Baltimore Ravens at the Houston Texans. Lamar Jackson, arguably the best quarterback in fantasy football this season between him and Josh Allen. This week, a potential high-scoring game once again. And Lamar is locked in weekly as a number 1-2 option overall at the quarterback position. C.J. Stroud is sit. It's been a down season in his second year in a sophomore slump for C.J. Stroud. He's turned the football over more this season than last season. He's lost a lot of offensive key parts. Stephon Diggs, he's been out for a while, out for the season. Tank Dell tore his knee up in last week's game. He's out for the season, obviously. And now pretty much down to Nico Collins, Joe Mixon out of the backfield, and Dalton Schultz. And this week versus the middle-of-the-pack defense, I don't have much confidence in Stroud, where his ceiling has definitely been limited this season. Seattle Seahawks at the Chicago Bears, Gino Smith, a borderline option. He's had a couple of good games here and there as Gino Smith. But in a championship ball game, it's just tough to trust Gino Smith. I know they got good options. Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf, Kenneth Walker or Charbonnet out of the backfield most weeks for this Seattle Seahawks team, and it's a good matchup. But Geno Smith, like I said, the games haven't been there, and the ceiling isn't that high as well, so he's a borderline option. Caleb Williams, a borderline option. I know he's got good receivers, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen in this offense for the Chicago Bear team. This week, it's a pretty decent matchup versus Seattle Seahawks. Their defense isn't really that good, but Caleb Williams, some weeks he has good games, and some weeks he don't show much. This week, in the middle of the pack matchup versus Seahawks defense, he's a borderline option. Los Angeles Chargers at the Patriots, Justin Herbert is starting this one. I know the last couple weeks the numbers haven't been great until he bounced back last week with a nice fantasy game. And Ladd McConkey's been a key in this offense all season long. And there's a chance as well J.K. Dobbins returns, where the practice window opened up for Dobbins. So this week in a good matchup, even though it's going to be cold weather at New England, he's a start. Drake May, he's been pretty decent, I thought, this season in his rookie year. So this week, Drake May, middle of the pack matchup, Los Angeles Chargers coming to town. But he just has limited weapons offensively. Demario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, obviously Hunter Henry in the offense. But his value is for the most part 20, 22 fantasy points weekly for Drake May. But I believe next season, if they could get a T. Higgins or a wide receiver like that Drake May could be a solid fantasy option. But this week versus the Chargers, he's a sit. Denver Broncos at the Cincinnati Bengals. This could be a high-scoring game between these two teams. Bo Nix is a start. It's been a good rookie season, no doubt about it. And pretty much he's operating with one solid, consistent option in the offense in Cortland Sutton and still putting up fantasy points. So Bo Nix, we know he could rush the football a little bit. He gets 3 or 4 points weekly running as well. And this week of the Cincinnati defense that can't stop anyone, he's a start. Joe Burrow is a start. He's been matchup proof all season long, and pretty much you pencil him in for 300 passing yards and 3 touchdowns weekly. And when you got wide receivers like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, it also makes things very easy. Arizona Cardinals at the Los Angeles Rams, Kyler Murray a start. I know the numbers have been inconsistent all season long, but this week it's a matchup at a Ram team he's very familiar with, his Kyler Murray. And Trey McBride, I don't believe, is going to have another down game like he did last week. Murray still gets those running yards on the ground, 4 or 5 points weekly. And this week in this matchup at the Rams, where it could be a high-scoring game, he's a start. Matthew Stafford is start. I know last week was a down game, and usually it is down games when they travel cross-country as this Los Angeles Ram team. But back home, indoors, not dealing with the cold weather elements like they did in New York at the Jets last week. I think Stafford bounces back, and when you got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, it makes your job easier. Carolina Panthers at the Tampa Bay Bucks, Bryce Young has said he's definitely improved over the last month of the season since he came back off the bench after watching Andy Dalton for a month, is Bryce Young. So Young's making things happen with his legs. He's throwing the football more accurate, and he totally doesn't look like a bust right now. But this week, in a matchup, even though Tampa Bay isn't that good, Bryce Young, he just hasn't been consistently an option for fantasy owners. Baker Mayfield to start, one of the better quarterbacks in fantasy football, believe it or not, this season. And when you got Mike Evans, a good running game, Rashad White, Bucky Irvin, and you're just a gunslinger like Baker Mayfield is, points are going to be put on the board. So this week in a good matchup versus a defense that can't stop anyone, he's a start. New York Jets at the Buffalo Bills. Aaron Rodgers a sit. Last week he got off to a good start in that game versus the Rams, and then they just couldn't do anything after that first quarter touchdown to Devontae Adams. So Rodgers, we know his best years are behind him. We know he's 41 years old, is Aaron Rodgers. And also, with the cold weather, Achilles injury is going to stiffen up. Obviously, he's a year and a half off that injury now, is Aaron Rodgers. But still, it's a tough injury to come off of. And at 40 years old, your body don't heal like you used to. So this week in a tougher matchup versus a good defense, he's a sit. Josh Allen to start. Last week, worst game of the season for Josh Allen. But I believe it's not going to happen 2 weeks in a row. And this week, you know they got to go out there and try to get the win. Is this Buffalo Bill team where they're still trying to get in for that number one seed, even though the Kansas City Chiefs don't lose. So this week with a matchup versus the Jets, they can't stop anyone. He's a start. Indianapolis Colts at the New York Giants. Anthony Richardson to start. Last week he had a nice ball game running the football, passing the football, even though it was the Jonathan Taylor show, rushing over 200 yards in that ball game. But I think Anthony Richardson versus one of the worst teams in the league, and let's be honest, they're tanking, and it looks like they're not even trying on defense, is this Giant DST. He's a start. Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, Tim Boyle, whoever the quarterback's going to be, they're sit. None of these guys are starting quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. Drew Lock, he's getting an MRI anyway on his shoulder, so I believe he's not going to play in this game, even if it comes back clean. And Tommy DeVito's been banged up over the last few weeks, and Tim Boyle has been an option as well for this Giant team. So obviously it's a quarterback room that you just don't want to touch. Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings. Jordan Love a start. He's been a good quarterback for the majority of the season, and this week could be a high-scoring game between these two division rivals indoors at Minnesota. So Jordan Love, he's been playing good football. I know the numbers are a little bit down from last season, but weekly he still is a start. Sam Darnold the start. It's been a great season for Darnold, and he's going to get paid this offseason, either from the Minnesota Vikings or someone else. When you got guys like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones in the backfield, it makes everything easier. So this week in the matchup, even versus a good defense, I think Darnold's a starting quarterback. Vegas Raiders at the Saints, not much to say in this one. Aidan Okano, he's had a couple decent games here and there, but even in a good matchup with the New Orleans Saints in a championship game or a third-place game, I'm not going to have confidence in him unless you're in deep two quarterback leagues. He's a sit. Spencer Rattler a sit as well. I know he's got some rushing upside. I know it's a good matchup versus a Raider defense that's given up a lot of points this season of quarterbacks, but Spencer Rattler with limited weapons and a young quarterback who just isn't all that good. He was the third string coming into the season, is a sit. Tennessee Titans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Both these quarterbacks, they could go out there and have good games, but it's another matchup where I don't trust any of these quarterbacks in a division game. So Rudolph last week, a lot of garbage time in that ball game in Indianapolis, where they actually made it a game late in the fourth quarter with him and Calvin Ridley on the same page. It's been a good year for Tony Pollard out of the backfield, but still Mason Rudolph, I can't trust him. He's a sit. Mac Jones a sit. Ryan Thomas, the only option in the passing game, it seems like, week in and week out for this Jacksonville Jaguar team. And Mac Jones, we know he's been a bust where he was drafted a few years ago. This week in a matchup, even decent on paper versus the Titans a sit. Tua, I would give him the starting nod. I know Tua's definitely struggled on the road, but this week a pretty good matchup at the Cleveland Browns, where their defense all season long has been giving up points to the quarterback position. So Tua's locked in with Tyreek Hill, obviously, even though he's had a down year. Gino Smith, he's been one of the better tight ends in all fantasy football. And Devon Achane, one of the better receiving backs out of the backfield. So Tua, I would give him the green light this week. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Jameis Winston, whoever starts this game or sits for me. DTR, he hurt the calf in last week's game, and he might not give it a go in this week's ball game for the Cleveland Browns. So Jameis Winston might step back in to the starting lineup. And we saw last week this Miami defense did a great job versus a good San Francisco 49er offense. So whoever the quarterback is, they're sitting. And especially with Jameis Winston, he could give you a 40-point game or he could give you a 5-point game. So I just wouldn't trust any of these quarterbacks. And this hits this week. Dallas Cowboys at the Philadelphia Eagles. Cooper Rush is sit. He's been playing great football, no doubt about it, filling in for Dak Prescott over the last 6 weeks. He is Cooper Rush. But this week, a tough matchup versus one of the better defenses and secondaries in the league. Even though last week they did get torched by Jaden Daniels. But obviously, Cooper Rush is no Jaden Daniels. And even though he's got CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson in this passing game, I just don't see Cooper Rush going out there and having a high ceiling. He's a sit. Jalen Hurts right now in concussion protocol. But if he plays, he's a start. This Cowboy defense all season long is giving up tons of points. If he could get out of the concussion protocol and be ready for Sunday's ball game, he's a start. Kenny Pickett a sit. Kenny Pickett last season, we saw enough out of him where he's not a viable option in fantasy football. And he's more of a backup quarterback, and that's exactly why he was signed as a backup this season for the Eagles. So I know they got great weapons, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley out of the backfield. But Pickett, even in a decent matchup, would be a sit if he starts. Atlanta Falcons at the Commanders, Michael Penix is a sit. Last week he didn't have to do much in the passing game, but he had some sharp throws to Drake London. Darnell Mooney made a few plays. Bijan Robinson out of the backfield. But this week a tougher matchup at the Commanders, his first road game of his NFL career. And I believe next season Penix could be a decent quarterback for fantasy owners, but right now, in a Week 17 matchup, I just don't have much confidence. And like I said, after coming off a good matchup last week versus the Giants where he didn't do much, he's a sit. Jaden Daniels, he's a start each and every week. What a rookie season it's been for Jaden Daniels. He goes out there, he continues to put points on the board, and he's been a quarterback who was injured but playing through injury in the middle of the part of the season. But right now he looks healthy, he's running the football more. This week with Atlanta Falcon defense that isn't all that good coming to town, he's a must-start. Final game of the week, Monday night, Detroit Lions at the Niners. I believe this could be a high-scoring game. Jared Goff locked in weekly as a start. When you got players like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporte, and Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield, you're bound to put up points week in and week out. And that's exactly been the case with Jared Goff, where it seems like weekly now, 25, 30 fantasy points he's putting up, so he's a start. Brock Purdy a start. I know last week wasn't a great game for Purdy, but he still has decent options on the offense. Deebo Samuel had one of his better games of the year. George Kittle, still one of the better tight ends in the league. And also Juwan Jennings, he's had some flashes this season, even though the last 2 weeks his numbers have dropped off. So this week here, Brock Purdy, I would give him the starting nod. That's quarterback starts at every matchup in championship week for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.